Who is this actually good for, who should skip it, and is it worth the price for normal everyday buyers? That's the question that keeps popping up every time I see a new mobile workstation on the market. You're probably wondering if the HP ZBook Firefly 16G9 will actually make a difference in your workflow or if it's just another pricey laptop that sits on a shelf. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's unpack the real-world setup, the day-to-day usability, and the hidden trade-offs so you can decide whether this machine belongs in your bag or not. First off, the biggest hesitation most people have with a mobile workstation is the fear of overpaying for a laptop that looks impressive on paper but underdelivers when you actually need it for design work, video editing, or heavy multitasking. The ZBook Firefly 16 tries to walk that line by pairing a 12th Gen Intel Core i7-1260P with 16GB of RAM and a 512GB SSD. On paper that sounds like enough horsepower to run Adobe Creative Cloud, Autodesk applications, or a handful of virtual machines. The question is, does that translate into a smooth experience when you're moving between a CAD model, a Premiere timeline, and a Slack conversation? In my own testing, the 16GB of memory felt genuinely generous. I could keep Photoshop, Lightroom, and a web browser with dozens of tabs open without the system begging for more RAM. The no-slowdown feeling is especially noticeable when you're layering high-resolution images or rendering a quick preview. The 512GB SSD, while not massive, gave me enough breathing room for a year's worth of project files, especially if you're diligent about archiving older work to an external drive or cloud storage. The speed of the SSD was evident right away. Boot times were under a minute and loading a 3GB video project in Premiere was practically instantaneous. For anyone whose daily routine revolves around juggling multiple professional apps, that kind of responsiveness can shave minutes off each task, which adds up over weeks. Now let's talk about the display. A 16-inch panel with a 1920x1200 resolution lands you in a sweet spot between the classic 1080p and a full 4K screen. The extra vertical pixels give you a bit more real estate for timelines and tool palettes, and the color reproduction is decent enough for casual photo work. I ran a couple of Lightroom edits side by side with a calibrated external monitor, and the differences were subtle enough to notice if you're a color-critical photographer, but not a deal-breaker for most designers. The screen also leans toward a matte finish, which helps keep glare at bay when you're working in a bright office or a coffee shop. One practical strength that often gets overlooked is the laptop's portability. The Firefly series is marketed as a mobile workstation, and the chassis lives up to that claim. It's thin enough to slide into a standard backpack and light enough that you can carry it around all day without it feeling like a workout. That matters if you're a consultant who jumps between client sites, a freelancer who works from co-working spaces, or a student in a design program that expects you to bring your own hardware to the studio. The silver finish looks professional, which is a small but nice bonus when you're meeting clients. However, the ZBook Firefly 16 isn't without its compromises. The biggest one is the lack of a dedicated GPU. The i7-1260P comes with Intel's integrated graphics, which are fine for everyday tasks and even light video playback, but they will struggle with heavy 3D rendering or real-time ray tracing in applications like Blender or Maya. If your workflow leans heavily on GPU-accelerated workloads, you'll feel the pinch and may need an external GPU enclosure or a different laptop that ships with an NVIDIA RTX chip. That's a cost and convenience factor worth weighing. Battery life is another area where the trade-off shows up. Mobile workstations tend to prioritize performance, and the Firefly is no exception. In my usage running Photoshop, a web browser, and a background file sync, the battery held out for about 5 to 6 hours before I had to plug in. That's enough for a typical workday if you have access to power at your desk, but it won't get you through a long flight or a full day of client meetings without a charger in sight. If you're the type of professional who needs to be truly untethered, you might want to look at models that boast longer endurance or consider carrying a high-capacity power bank. Thermals are also something to keep an eye on. The thin chassis means the cooling system has to work harder, and under sustained load the fan ramps up noticeably. In a quiet office that's acceptable, but if you're editing video on a shared desk, the fan noise can become a distraction. It's not a deal breaker, but it's a nuance that buyers often forget when they focus solely on specs. So, who should buy the HP ZBook Firefly 16G9? If you're a creative professional who needs a reliable, portable machine that can handle multi-app workflows, light to moderate video editing, and occasional 2D design work, this laptop hits a comfortable sweet